Hi, everyone. Welcome to Enable the World with Tech, Conversations with Prashant Gami. Today, we have Peter William from Deloitte Digital, founder of Deloitte Digital. He leads Center for the Edge at Deloitte. He has been involved in a lot of new startups, new technologies. One of the main ones that he's currently involved in is called Packform, a managed marketplace for packaging. And he has been running a lot of charity work as well in Victoria bushfire, Queensland floods, Christchurch earthquake, and so on. So welcome, Peter, to the show. Thank you for coming here.
No worries. Thanks. Really pleased to be here, Prashant.
Yeah. So today, like this podcast, we mainly go around talking technology and learning that came around like running a tech business, finding a tech business and scaling it up. So you have been at the forefront, like you started dealing with internet in 93. I was looking at some of your podcasts and articles and it was amazing. I think I was in my nappies back then, but the idea of nowadays, technology sort of like everybody says, technology is changing everything, but I guess you have seen it that it has been around for so long. What is actually Center for the Edge and new generation technology? How do you view that?
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. I look at it in two ways. One, how do I think this technology or combination of technologies will play out? But I also look at it around the problems it solves or how it can be applied, and probably more problems to solve or how it could be applied. So if you go back to 1993, and when I first started using the web, it was like my background's as an accountant, and I used to be a company doctor, dealing with companies in trouble. And I'd been hearing about the internet and the World Wide Web, had no idea what it was, and I went to an internet cafe in London, which said "internet" here, and show me the internet. And I what struck me after a couple of minutes was that I was able to be viewing material information on computers all around the world at no cost, other than your internet cost, which used to be $6 an hour or something back in those days. And it was like, wow, suddenly, I've lived in a world constrained by either the books in a library or the knowledge of people around me, and suddenly the world's information will open up. And to me, that was profound. And I was like, wow, that's going to be the biggest thing I'll ever see in my lifetime. So again, I suppose if you look at that, first day, what's going on here? Oh, well, we're connecting phones. And again, that's interesting. It's sort of like existing phone networks with existing computer hardware with an open source protocol around HTML. Suddenly it's, and HTML was really just a sort of new addition to SGML, Standard Generalized Markup Language. So it was sort of existing things tweaked and combined, which suddenly, bang, changed everything. And really, when you look at it back at the internet, we had the internet emerge back in around 1966, which was really, the packet switching, TCP, IP type stuff. But it was when it became accessible through the Mosaic browser that, that's sort of when I started to get involved in it. It was like, wow. And I think that's the way to look at it. It's, and I started thinking about, what can I do with this? Yes. And then the first thing I did, because I was working as an accountant in the UK actually at the time, I had a role of sort of trying to standardize and distribute knowledge and information. And I'm like, well, why don't I do this using the internet and the web? True. So, see something, think something, but most importantly, do something. How can I try this out? What can I learn? And that's the sort of thing I say to people about technology. You've got to be able to outthink, you've got to be able to outlearn, and you've got to be able to out-execute. And it's not about outspending. If you're going to research, sort of nuclear fission or something, it's going to cost you a bit of money. But for most of the stuff we want to do, the technology is probably out there or potentially emerging that we can use it and in a new context.
And you correctly spotted two things. One is doing something, which is very important, and not doing very complex things unless it is required. And that's where I think most of the companies get stuck. They either start doing something that keeps going on for 3-4 years, or they don't do anything. And
Yeah.
how do you view it in current age, like when industry 4.0, climate tech, fintech, and all these tech buzzwords are going around? How do company actually say, what am I going to achieve next 6 months or next year or something?
Yeah, I talk about it, this sort of notion of think long, act short.
Yes.
Yeah, if I hear of a technology project, and I won't name any organisations, but we started on this project in 2016 and we're going to launch in 2023, or we started on it in 2008 and now we're going to launch it in 2015. It's like, I can guarantee you it's going to be a stuffer. Yes. Because the world has changed in all that time. And so sort of having a longer term vision of what you want to achieve, but then sort of saying, what's that logical next step? Or what could I achieve over the next 3 to 6 months to test this idea? Because the problem is if you go down this pathway for years and then you sort of come out of the, and go, ta-da. I mean, it was interesting when I came back to Australia in 1996, one of the first jobs I did was I was asked to have a look at a technology system that had been custom built by an Australian government department. And effectively took 4 years, but they didn't do it with the users. They didn't test it as they went. And it was a massive failure. And it was like, oh my God, but and it just happened to combine technology and the field that I used to work in. So it was like, well, hang on, that's not the way you work. When you do this stuff, you're looking at this and this, and these things need to be paired together. So actually at the database level, everything was fine. It was just the complexity at the interface level that was so problematic. So we basically redesigned the UI using sort of more web concepts than traditional green screen concepts, and bang, the system ran for another, probably still runs today. But but it was that sort of the sort of notion of, we know what we're doing at the start. We've got this long-term program and it's going to go for X number of years, as opposed to where can I get my foothold? Or the other one, where does this thing live or die? And how can I test it? So, you always hear me say, how do we test that? How do we prototype it? Can we find a lead client, or can we find a lead user? Because I want to find somebody who would use it in the field, because it's very easy to sit back and say, oh, I'll develop this technology and it'll magically, everybody will want to use it, versus how do we find somebody who lives in this world or in the sphere that we're trying to play?
That's the thing, right? That there are people with domain and business knowledge, and then there are people who understand technology. And as you touched, right, the domain knowledge is fine, but they try to solve it in a traditional way of solving, and technologies are sort of sometimes go like, how do you say, idealistic, that this is how it's supposed to be built, but they ignore the business case. So how do you make sure you get both? How do you get the collaboration between those two?
It's interesting, I always said, when I was running Deloitte digital and web development, mobile development stuff, is like, never ask a client what they want, because they don't know what they can have. Yes. What we need to do is like, what do you want to achieve? What makes life a pain in the ass? I mean, what makes life a pain in the ass is almost like, what, if I can solve your pain point. So if you took pack form, so me and an entrepreneur mate of mine and a guy who's a very successful packaging sales guy in a large organisation, and he said that 90 to 95% of his time was chasing his tail, faxing, and this is like only a few years ago, faxing, phone calls, emails, where's this, where's that, I need a quote, where's the bill, when's the delivery? It was just this sort of noise and chaos. And we were like, well, we can fix that, we took the view that the packaging industry doesn't need another machine, another warehouse, another, truck. It's all there. It's just there's no information flow. So how do we make that information flow? How do we create visibility and transparency? So again, it's not great rocket science, but it was. But in the packaging industry, it's more complex than you think. But again, so we worked with the packaging sales guy and was like, okay, this is what we're thinking. What do you reckon? Prototyping, testing. But again, mainly at the UI level, because we could sort out the database, no problem. But it was a bit like, okay, how does this work? Do you realise that when you deliver packaging, if you've ordered 500 boxes, you might get 520 or 428? So, well, it's like, it depends on the machine and the roll of cardboard So you need to be able to adjust the invoice after the delivery to different to the order. It's like, shit, well, glad you told us that. It was a little bit of a way into the project.
Of course. Yeah.
But okay, all right. So we did it, and it was interesting. We were talking to a large packaging group, and they saw that functionality. We were sort of walking through it, and wow, how long did it take you to build that? It's like, our developers sort of knocked it out probably 2 weeks, and then a couple of weeks of testing, 4 weeks. I don't know, maybe 20 grand or something. And, we've spent millions trying to work on that reconciliation process, and we've got 14 people who do that. That's their job.
I understand.
And again, it's sort of it's just a different mentality where you're sort of looking at what's the pain, where how does that thing work in practice? What do your customers want to do? What's the reality in terms of the way that this industry works? So it's so again, it's not about thinking you know everything. It's about working with those end users. And the other one is almost like when you see the excitement on an end user's face when you deliver something they, or even through testing, it's like, you can do that. It's that there's nothing like it in the world. It's well, I built a system with some developers and some tax people at Deloitte around the JobKeeper time, to automate the JobKeeper application. And we were using, it was done by Zoom and using Miro, and we had a designer and developer doing the sort of basically doing the whole use case flows all the way through.
Yes.
And because these people had never seen this before, they thought it was like magic. Like, we actually spent 2 hours and you've designed a whole system with all of the decision points and and they were like, this is unbelievable. And it was sort of, but it sort of reminded me that sometimes the stuff that we do in technology that we take for granted to other people can look like magic, but then encouraging and saying, well, there's a lot more we can do. That's sort of how you do it. So, if we boil it back, focus on what is the big outcome that you want to do? What's the problem you want to solve? What currently limits or makes life a pain in the ass? How can we use sort of design, user interfaces, flows, and other combinations of technology, could be AI or whatever, to make that seamless and enjoyable and allow the people who are going to be using that technology to focus on what their core operation is, their core thing is. So I want
to touch base one point that you mentioned, like creating the prototype. And a lot of the time when I deal with customers, they confuse prototype with the production. So what they try to do is call it a prototype, but they try to build a production grade system, and they think that, that should be built in like, $20,000 and should be like, available to everyone. Can you just go a little bit into like, when you have a prototype, what does that mean? And
so for me, I always start off with rough sketched prototypes. So, I'll do what I call a rough sketched broader system.
Yes.
Prototype, so it'll be on paper. It will be drawing.
Yes.
And it'll be like, the problem we've got is this, and if we do this, and then we might use a bit of AI here, but it's got to also work on mobile, and so it's sort of like a diagrammatic overview of what we're trying to do. But then when we go down to a prototype, it'll be it could be a drawing on a whiteboard. It could be a rough sketched series of potential screens. So, and the reason that I'm so big on rough sketching is that too often we'll see you see people come to you with a fully blown designed, even if they're wireframes at times. It's like boom, boom, boom. It's all done. It all works this way. When it's rough sketched, it feels as though everybody knows it's not finished. It's not done. So it's something we can converse about, where the more formal, the more beautiful, the more produced you make it look, it sort of says, this isn't a prototype, this is what we're going to do. It's like if somebody sends you a 75-page strategy document and says, I want your feedback.
True.
And, I don't agree with that. It's like, well, it's like, and then I'm like, you didn't want feedback, you wanted a pat on the back. So, if you produce something that looks complete, Or it's the same in, with people send you out a specification document. Yeah, we want you to review the specification document, and it's that, like 100 pages big and everything's there, and non-technical people look and go, oh, wow, this must be right, because look how formal it is. How
beautifully and formally.
And they don't they don't even read it because they don't understand it. But it's a bit like if I put in front of them a screen, like it would work this way. Oh, no, but, that's not quite. So very much about doing it really rough. I always say it's really easy to change a line on a rough sketch drawing than it is to change a system once it's been deployed into production.
And how does that prototype then lead to production? What is the timeline?
So then what we do would we probably turn it into a clickable wireframe.
Yes.
And then we'd say, right, what I need you to do is I want you to go in, discover a product, and place an order for it.
Understand.
For example.
Yep.
And and the other one, you use video as well. And if you start to see them screw their face up and okay, we haven't designed it right. But if it's like, if you can see them follow the flows and avoid the, it's oftentimes I'll see startups and I'll say, show me your tech or whatever, and it's like, oh no, don't explain it to me, because if I was an end user at home, you're not going to be sitting over my shoulder telling me how it works. You go over there and let me work through this interface. Because again, it's sort of like, it's a bit different. If you're working in an internal environment, you're deploying systems internally, you can make people use whatever you've inflict on them, but you're putting it out into the wild, into the open world. It's like, you're not necessarily going to have founders standing over their shoulders saying, no, don't click that. So it's very much that iteration process of, okay, here's the core functionality. Does it flow? Does it work? Does it make sense? And then at that point, you get to the point of, we're getting a 90% completion on the tasks that we tested. Okay, you know what? We've probably got a pretty good design, because even at 90%, I can then, once I start to add color, other scaffolding around it, we can help the user.
And how do you lead that to a actually production running system, like when the pack form actually had someone that client can use?
So what we did is we built out the sort of first fundamentals of it, and we just started with the one sales guy, and I basically said to him, the day that you come in and say, you've turned that 90% of my time to 10% of my time, that's when we're ready to go.
Understand.
And that took about 6 months.
Okay.
So we built it, deployed it with one user, one sales guy and his customers to sort of work it out and identify any nuances or things that could be better. And then it was like, we're ready. And since then, we're continuing to, we release every week. So we have a sort of, what's really important to us, how do we sort of make the system work better for suppliers? How do we make it work better for customers? How do we make it work better for our dealers? And it was funny, like, because it grew so fast, we outgrew Xero in the first year.
Wow.
So we selected Xero as our accounting system, and then after about 12 months, we were making too many API calls.
Sorry to break you. The other pitfall that I see is, because when we do the brainstorming, there are probably 20, 30 features, major features that we see that, okay, all these that it can do and all these it can expand to and everything. So the wireframe is very comprehensive, but I am assuming that the first version that you had out in the open didn't have all those 30 features, but the major one that actually, important.
Yeah, it's sort of like, let's start with the skateboard before we move into, the semi-trailer truck. So what are those core features? So I need to be able to place an order, and I need to be able to put a call out to suppliers to see if they can supply that order.
And you touch really beautifully three major blocker that people get stuck into. One, without doing or prototyping, they assume that they know everything and they start to design everything. B, obviously not prototyping, not discussing with and customer and everything. And then third one is building everything. So they end up building for 3 years without actually going out there and finding out that what they built, half of that is actually unuseful.
Yeah, and I think the other point is, it's like success in technology these days, you don't have to build everything, you know?
Exactly.
Okay, we need an accounting system. Good. What will we use? Okay, Xero. Good. We outgrew that. Good. Stick in NetSuite.
Yes.
So we're not going to build our accounting system. You know, we need authentication. Okay, we'll use OAuth.
Yes.
You know, so we're using open source components. We're using commercially available components, and we're only building and integrating the pieces that are new. So you know, technology
leveraging a lot of off-the-shelf for integration pieces rather than building your own.
Yeah. So it's sort of, one of my colleagues says that technology these days is much more about elegant integration than it is about invention, you know. So you know, it's the same as like, you know, for a lot of online businesses or whatever, they're all going to, or most of them are going to need some sort of content management system. Well, good, pick an open source one, you know, use WordPress if you want, or use something, your Drupal or Magnolia or whatever. But and the other thing as well is that you have to be sort of, when you're looking at that stuff, is like, is there a big community around it that will maintain the development of it? Yeah. So I've always been a big believer in using open source technology that's got a really solid community around it, because they will develop and continue to do the work. And also putting back what we do. It means that we can move much faster, and you're not creating legacy of. I heard of a startup recently that was. I was talking to the product manager. I said, "Oh, what are you using for the content management side?" "Oh, we're building our own." I'm like, "Why?"
Why?
Oh, well, you know, the execs want our own one because they think, you know, we should have our own one. I'm like, that's madness. You know, like you're not going to be able to. Maintain the development momentum of a community of 20,000 developers or whatever in some of these major open source ones. So use what they've got, add your bits if you want to, but integrate it with what the use case or the end users that, you know, the service that you're going to offer, rather than sort of feel like I've got to build everything from scratch.
The other thing I always see, and I always tell people, that you are over engineering. What that means is, they say, all right, I'm going to do this with AI. And on the day one, they say, oh, where is my AI? But, you know, as a software engineer, I know that, okay, until you have 1 billion record or 1 million record, your AI not going to even do anything. So it's very hard sometimes to, like, you know, explain people that you're going to start with simple logic that you understand and you see in the like just a business logic kind of thing, and then you're going to use AI when you have large data. How do you deal with that?
It was interesting. We had one of the somebody looked at it from an investor point of view, looked at PAC form for, oh, you're not using AI. And it's like, well, what do you want us to use it for? Right, you know, this was a couple of years ago. Now we'd use AI to be able to say, well, you know, the most important thing here is delivery time. Okay, so location becomes important. You know, so if I've got to deliver it, you know, I'm sourcing it from China or India versus sourcing it from, you know, Los Angeles. You know, the customer needs it tomorrow. Well, okay, good. Here's the suppliers that potentially could meet this thing. You know, so again, starting to take the data that we've got and use it. But for most cases, it's like, like you say, you know, AI is where you've got lots of records or machine learning, and it's like, I mean, and you know, just talking about over-engineering, you know, why isn't it on a blockchain? It's like, oh my God, you know, like, is there a double spend problem here? What do you mean? I mean, blockchain solve double spend. So where's my double spend problem that I need to solve here? I don't understand. It's like, I know you don't understand because you're talking shit, because you know, I'm just sort of, it's just like at the moment, I had something recently where I was asked to come in and talk to a group, and they'd had some futurists in there who were, had done a pack about everything we do in 2030 will be done via virtual reality on the metaverse. Every asset in the world will be tokenized on the blockchain. And I'm like, oh God, what bullshit, you know? It's sort of this shiny new thing, and you know, people say, oh, what do you think of the metaverse? I think it's good, because then people can shut up about NFTs for a while. I just get so frustrated with this this sort of technology determinism, because somebody says there's this technology that suddenly everything in the world will be solved by it. And we just see that's just palpably isn't the way it works. It's often combinations of existing technologies that are combined in a context to create new opportunity. And it's very rarely one element of technology that suddenly magically blows up everything.
Yes, no, totally get it. And so as a technology leader, like you are running the Center for the Edge, so obviously you are the futurist as well, that what is the coming next that I need to know about today. So what is on your list that you say, all right, climate tech or fintech, or like, this is what I'm really interested in, I want to go there, or I want to know about?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I look at sort of the tech as part of it, but I'm much more interested in how am I organised and structured to experiment and learn.
Yes.
So it goes back to that notion about learning.
Yes.
So what interesting things am I seeing coming through? So if I looked at it, let's say climate tech, I think that clearly we need to, there's storage issues, there's management of the grid, there's inertia, in terms of ensuring that power is always available. So there are a few bigger problems to solve. So I'm interested in what sort of developments am I seeing there? And I'm also interested in the structures like community-based microgrids. I do a lot of work in natural disasters.
Mm-hmm.
I live in an area that was smashed by Black Saturday, and a couple of family members got burnt out in the Black Saturday bushfire. So I've been involved in that. But again, I'm talking around there about localized redundancy, because what happens is our current infrastructure model is large-scale infrastructure deployed everywhere. Yes. But in a natural disaster, the power will go down, which then means the telco network will go down. So what have we got for localized redundancy? If we had a localized microgrid, solar panels, Starlink, bang. Yes. And like one of my mates up in the floods just recently, he has 2 Starlinks. I'm not quite sure why, but he loves Elon Musk. So he's got a Tesla car. But anyway, he just took one of his Starlink dishes down to the local civic centre, and suddenly the telco network was down, the NBN was down. But, so I think a lot about, what is out there that solves this problem of localised redundancy? What are the bigger problems? I'm interested in material science a bit. I'm interested in graphene. Which is a sort of emerging material which has got some really interesting properties. I think I'm interested into sort of what I call hyperconnectivity. What does it mean where everything is connected to everything? But I'm interested in sort of what are we doing with data? Because my own view is that whilst there's an explosion of data, we don't scratch the surface on what we can do with it. So things like problems like how do we redesign a grid and use the data that we've got from a multitude of sources, which could be usage data, weather data, production data from or performance data from every solar panel out there, to say how do we balance this grid to make sure that we can maintain a stable power network. So again, I'm interested in that stuff. I'm actually interested in social technology as well. So it's sort of interesting that if we look at the impact of the pandemic on workplaces, one thing that I've seen is that social technology in workplaces tends to be very cliquey, very team-based. So whether it's Teams or Slack or whatever, but I feel like how do you build an organisational culture? How do you create serendipitous moments? How do I find who knows about what? And it's all in our data there, and but we don't use it as organisations. So I'm sort of interested more in those sort of things, like how do I create serendipity? How do I feel part of an organisation? And use that sort of social network analysis and the data and who are the connectors and all of those type of things. Yes. I'm interested in sort of, interestingly enough, I'm doing some work in next generation fire retardants to both protect assets and stop fires. I'm doing some work in a circular economy market garden thing up in coming out of the bushfires. So so again, I'm not sort of running around with an Oculus Rift saying that I'm going to buy a new NFT outfit on a blockchain, but I'm much more interested in how do we sort of manage and optimize our world around, the food we eat, the re-platforming to renewable energies, re-platforming away from internal combustion engines, better systems about preventing natural disasters, all those sort of things are the things I'm interested in. Yeah.
And the one point I want to touch base is the shortage of skill right now. It's a massive problem that everybody he's like, I want to find developers, doers, skill-based people, but it's very tough market to find good people. Are you seeing something in your industry, your organization and everything, and how are you dealing with that?
So the first thing I say is most organizations I see don't let employees use the skills they have. Yes. So, are we allowed to, sort of run around and take videos and post them on a sort of in-house YouTube so anybody wants to know how to do something can do it? No, we don't do that. Have your employees got those skills? Absolutely. Yeah. Have your employees got marketing? Shit, yeah, look how many TikTok users I've got. Are they allowed to say anything? No, that's all bad, So, my employees don't have skills in AI. Oh, don't they? Have you ever asked them? Have you ever allowed them to use, sort of say, hey, we've got an AI project. Does anybody want to come and have a crack at it?
Come and have a crack at it. Yes.
Yeah. And then you'll find, I've always found, because, working with the tech people I do, I've got all these bloody tech geniuses, and I'm as interested in what they're doing at home as what they are at work, and I'm like, so, what stuff are you doing outside of work? Oh, I'm working on develop something new for the Linux kernel. Oh, shit, okay. So it's a bit like, so I used to sort of put out challenges and say to the people like, hey, what stuff's coming through that you're interested in and working on at home, or, you want to have a learn about. So let those skills, either identify the skills that people have got and let them use them, because what we're seeing in most organisations is they constrain. Or the other one is, I was talking to a large organisation the other day who had skills problem, recruitment, and high staff turnover. It's like, well, what impact what opportunity do software engineers have to choose the tools they use? Oh, no, they're done centrally. Oh, how long since you changed them? Oh, about 10 years. It's like, guys, that'd be like if I called a plumber to my house and said, mate, don't use the tools in your ute, use the ones I bought from Bunnings 10 years ago. It's like, let these people who are skilled in crafts and at the top of their game, adapt and learn and bring in new tools. So I talk a lot about how do I increase the absorptive capacity of my organisation, and that's by saying to you tech people, hey, what's coming through? What stuff you're working on? Is the stuff we're doing current? Is there better technology out there? If it's open source, even better. So I encourage that. The other thing is I'm quite a fan of boot camp sort of stuff. I'm doing one at the moment with Deloitte and Salesforce, and basically we've taken people who are sort of in their 30s. Some of them are ex-Defence Force, sort of second career, but no technology background. Some of them are women who are sort of economically disadvantaged, could be through domestic violence or, single mothers or things like that. And then another group are former elite athletes whose careers ended and what am I going to do now? And running them through like a 13-week boot camp style program with a job at the end. Now, because again, I don't expect them all to be, sort of Steve Wozniak or, Alan Turing, but getting them a start. And the other thing I see quite a bit at Deloitte Digital is that we've got a lot of people who've, done degrees in various domains and then go to a general assembly and do a boot camp around, data or programming or UI or whatever. And they come in ready to go, not great, fantastic, brilliant experts, but good enough to get a start. So, I'm a big believer in sort of creating opportunities to use the skills you have, to encourage people to investigate, explore, and have a point of view, to say, well, how can I develop people and give them the opportunity to develop? And because when I started, I did a HTML course online, but it was like really basic, just old, brochureware style website. And it was like, Yeah, I could do this, but I'll never be great at it. In terms of programming and coding, it's just too detailed for me. So yeah, it was like, well, let's go and find those people doing it. But I had to learn by doing. I had to learn by self-study, reading, prototyping, testing, and learning.
True.
And I'm a big believer in you build your skills through learning in what they call now learning in the flow of work, or learning on the job, or almost like an apprenticeship model where you've got people who are good at what they do, and you're continually bringing in people. So, so my view would be, is there a skill shortage? Yeah, maybe. Say Packform, we've got people from, Russia, Ukraine, actually, developers. We've got people in Philippines. We're a born virtual company, and everything's managed via Telegram. We don't use email. So, so I can see, like, if we need skills and if we need to grow by 20 people and we need developers, we can get them, because we're sort of thought beyond, they must come into the office on Monday morning and be sitting in front of me, so.
This is very interesting, because I was going to touch that. One of the things I always talk to people is elastic workforce. So what that means is you have some people in-house. Great. If you can't have enough people in-house, go and find consultants, freelancers, people who got those skills. If even you need bigger team, go to the consultancies or third-party organizations, source from them. And a lot of them have I always go back to people focus on what cup they are served in rather than what's in it. Is like, oh, I don't trust it. Oh, I don't do that way. Oh, in organization, we don't do that. And I read your article, get out of your own way. And that is so correct. You meant you have people from Russia, Ukraine, and everything. And a lot of time, COVID has certainly changed it, that things can run online. That has certainly been proven now. But still, there are a lot of people that goes, no. They have
it was sort of, it evolved because our CTO is Russian. And we were looking at trying to get developers in Australia. Like, sure, that's going to be hard, and it's going to cost us a fortune.
Yeah.
And we're a startup, so, and then he's like, well, I've got a heap of mates over there, and I've got a mate who runs a sourcing business, and boom. So, and interesting enough, some of them have moved over here, and, but again, we've got a young girl from China who is just a out of the box security, architecture, infrastructure specialist. Just, she was went to Beijing University and was one of the top students there. To get into Beijing University is hard enough, to be one of the top students. And she then did a master's at RMIT, and one of the team knew her or something. And that's the other thing. We had a town hall yesterday and talked to people in the Philippines. It's like, actually, have we ever done any recruiting there? And it's like, and somebody's like, oh, no, friends, and somebody goes family, and somebody goes husband. And it's like, so there's a little cohort of our team in the Philippines who are a bit like, oh, shit, we're growing, we need more people. They're good, come in. And and it's sort of, it probably, large organizations would freak out, but it's like, but they're coming in with people who know them, who trust them. You're not going to bring in somebody to their organisation who you think isn't going to cut it. They
still have your checks, but
they immediately become part of the culture, understand how we work, and so it's so that's been interesting. But again, because we haven't thought of ourselves as a place-based organisation, we've seen ourselves as a connected organisation. That happens to have no geographic constraint to it.
I always call it time-based versus task-based. So don't think of 9 to 5 or time they have to spend. It's how many tasks they have to do and deliver. And it's much
and
more...
who are they serving? And, making sure that you've got, if our customers are in the US, all of our sales and support people are in the US. But,
of course.
So that's okay. But, and we've got support people 24/7 to maintain the system in different parts of the world. But it's sort of and it was interesting. We were like this before the pandemic. So when the pandemic came through, it was like it had the sort of inability to move locations had no impact on us. So
it's actually interesting, because when I started running my company, I had that same problem that, because I didn't have an address that was in CBD, a lot of people like, you're not a company, like you're just group of people that would do work. And I'm like, that's a company. What more do you want?
Well,
you need a group of people doing work.
Yeah.
And
why do they all have to sit in the same place?
Yeah, I had so much resistance. People said, no, you are just group of freelance. And I'm like, no, this is a company. We don't need an office. We are all working either, client overseas or like, online, and all tools are online. Then what do you need? Like, you don't need brick and mortar. Now we have office, nobody comes, because what's the point of coming if they can do their work from everywhere?
Yeah, for sure. It's and I think that's going to be a challenge for a lot of organisations, because the thing I'm hearing out there, we need people to be in the office 50% of the time, or why? Oh, because of innovation and culture. And I'm like, so what? The only way you can have a culture or innovate or create connection is to have an office, is it? Oh, well, maybe not. It's like, right, flip it.
Yeah.
I have concerns about serendipity, about innovation, about collaboration, about culture. Yeah. What can I do to actually build on that and to make it not a problem? And that's where, again, you go back to tools like whether it's Telegram, WhatsApp, bloody Yammer, I don't care what it is, but it's the culture of, we work in the open, we post things, we have conversations. Like one of my favourite times at Packforms at Christmas, because we've got people all around the world posting, this is what we do for Christmas, this is what we do for Christmas. And, you've got snow in Russia, and you've got people in Vietnam, and so like, actually we're Buddhists, but we do this. So it's good. It's fun.
Right. Well, thanks, Peter, for coming, and wealth of knowledge, and a lot of insights that you have provided into innovation, technology, business, all areas of that. Really happy to have you here. And I look forward to collaborating and talking to you more over the.
No worries. Well, thanks. And thanks for doing this. It's, I think getting the world of practical technology out there beyond the hype and into, well, how do you actually do this stuff?
Yes.
By people who've done it, not necessarily by people who talk about what others have done, is where you get it. And you get it from, I always say to people, you learn the most from the backstories, not the finished product. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you. Well, thanks, Peter. Lovely having you here.